Silence fell on the border. Not closed, merely unimportant. Canada, for the first time in 75 years, ceased seeking Washington's permission and began to book flights to Delhi, Tokyo, and Canberra instead. In Ottawa, the maps no longer indicate south, they indicate all other places. And what's the most shocking part? It took everyone by surprise. This is not the way. Not a country whose entire economy was founded on the belief that America would always be present, always be dependable, and always provide the solution. Up until that point, it was. Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, is on the verge of undertaking an unprecedented action for a Canadian leader, wagering the country's future on global prospects outside of America. This week, he touches down in India. Then it's Australia. Next, Japan. Not intended for summits, for arrangements. Genuine ones, the kind that redirects cargo ships, alters contracts, and discreetly disassembles a 75-year-old economic partnership. And the world observes a middle power accomplishing what superpowers deemed unthinkable, distancing itself from the largest economy on the planet and thriving. The breaking point came with tariffs. Trump slapped 25% duties on Canadian steel and aluminum, then raised aluminum to a crushing 50% last June. He called it national security. Canada called it economic warfare. Then came 25% tariffs on automobiles assembled in Canada, a direct blow to Ontario's manufacturing heartland. Even when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down Trump's sweeping global tariffs last Friday, the sector-specific duties remained, cutting deep into Canada's industrial core. It was damaging right away and of historic proportions. For the first time, trade between the U.S. and Canada declined for 3 consecutive years. Bilateral trade decreased by more than 6% through November 2025, while overall U.S. trade increased by 5%. Canada's proportion of exports to the U.S. fell from 76% in 2024 to only 67.5% by December 2025. In 2024, goods valued at almost $3.6 billion crossed the border on a daily basis. Now those flows are being redirected. Jobs disappeared. Factories stood idle. Carney confronted a harsh truth. The Canadian economy was held captive by a neighbor who used tariffs as a weapon. Carney ceased his attempts to mend the relationship. He began constructing new ones. His journey, starting Thursday in New Delhi, represents a declaration of independence. The meeting with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi signifies a significant reset of relations that deteriorated after Trudeau's accusation in 2023 of India committing an assassination of a Sikh separatist on Canadian soil. Now they are resuming trade discussions regarding energy, AI, defense, critical minerals, and food security. Carney travels from India to Australia to meet with Prime Minister Albanese and deliver a speech to Parliament, marking the first visit by a Canadian PM to Parliament in almost 2 decades. Then it's off to Tokyo, where he will strengthen connections with Japan's Prime Minister Takaichi. The objective is bold. By 2035, non-U.S. exports from Canada should be doubled. This year, Carney eliminated tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles as part of a deal for Beijing to reduce duties on Canadian agriculture, marking a significant departure from U.S. policy. He urged the world at Davos to reject economic coercion from great powers. Everyone was aware of whom he referred to. The consequences are reshaping North America. Canadian manufacturers crushed by tariffs are now courting Asian and European markets. Energy exporters eye LNG terminals shipping to Japan and South Korea. Tech firms partner with Indian startups. But the transition is brutal. Retooling supply chains and finding distant buyers takes time and capital. The loss for America is subtle yet genuine. Consumers in the U.S. incur higher costs for Canadian steel and automobiles. Producers encounter disruptions. And from a strategic perspective, Washington observes as a reliable ally moves closer to associations with those who do not uphold American values. Canada's agreement with China served as a caution. If one exerts too much pressure, neighbors will seek out other allies. On a global scale, middle powers such as South Korea and Mexico are hedging their bets and decreasing their reliance on both the U.S. and China. Trade routes change. Vessels that used to berth at American ports are now routed through Singapore and Shanghai. This isn't about trade numbers, it's about trust. For 75 years, Canada and the U.S. shared the longest undefended border and mutual prosperity. That belief is cracking. The renegotiation of USMCA, the North American Trade Pact, has become a flashpoint. Canada and Mexico want to preserve it. Trump wants separate bilateral deals that would fracture integration. The WTO, UN, and IMF are watching carefully. When a solid democracy such as Canada determines that its closest ally cannot be depended on, what does this indicate about the state of the global order? Carney's message is unquestionable. When the system collapses, countries create new systems. Agreements concluded in English are being redrafted in Hindi and Mandarin, and Canada, the polite and predictable one, is at the forefront. This is a war-free zone, only a calm, systematic rebalancing. Carney is not wagering against America, he's wagering on Canada, and he's demonstrating that reliance, even on a superpower, constitutes a weakness. The world is paying attention due to its intentional nature, its effectiveness, and the fact that it poses a difficult question for Washington. What occurs when loyalty turns into a liability? Is this how alliances fade? Not with confrontation, but with quiet exits and new handshakes. Does Canada's pivot signal the end of North American integration or something smarter? Drop your thoughts below. Hit subscribe to follow how this reshapes global trade. Share this if you think the world is watching more than Trump realizes. The handshakes in New Delhi matter. The silence in Washington matters more.